All right. Good afternoon, Mesa Public Schools. I'm Andy Forlis, the very proud superintendent of this amazing school district, and we have a special edition of Facebook Live today. We want to continue to talk about health and safety. Specifically, we want to talk about criteria and the decision making that we work through to change a learning model at a school. I am joined by our Associate Superintendent, Mrs. Holly Williams, who spends much of her day studying our data, working with individual campuses, individual departments, and individual cases to learn lots of information before we make a decision. So we welcome your questions. We see that there was already some chatter on Facebook before we got started today. Holly, would you like to do a quick introduction or conversation, and then we'll jump into some questions that are starting to come in?
Sure, Dr. Forlis. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you have had a happy Monday and are looking forward to a wonderful Thanksgiving with your friends and family. Hopefully, small gatherings to keep us all safe, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I just am eager to share with you what we know about the data here in Mesa, and we have talked all along through this pandemic that we were eager to have Mesa data and not just be guided by the data that the state has or the county has, but to take that data to inform our decisions here locally. And so today I'm hoping to share some of that information with you so you can be in the know on how we go about making decisions about school openings and closings and learning models, but more importantly that you have the confidence that the schools are a safe place to be as we watch the data specifically to each campus of the 85 that we have going every single day. So I'm eager to hear your questions and share some information with you today.
And as we get started, I want to share that we have had requests from employees and from families to say, so what is that formula? How do we know that schools are going to close or they're going to change their learning model? We know that in March, through an executive order with our governor, all schools in Arizona were put into a remote learning environment. And we began remote learning on August 4th. We moved to 2 days of modified in-person learning on September 14th. And then when we returned from October break on October 12th, we began 5 days of modified in-person learning for those that chose that. And families all along can always choose remote if that is the best choice for their children. And so we've been working along in 5 days of modified in-person learning. And again, we have been asked, what is that formula? How do we know when you're going to change our learning model? And we have surrounding districts that have adopted a mathematical formula. We've spent quite a bit of time studying that, and we believe that studying individual cases by school tells us a better story so that we can make a more accurate decision for that particular campus. So please know that while it is not very simple and easy for us to communicate that, it is what is in the best interest of our children. And because we have one goal, is to keep our schools open as safely as we possibly can. And so with that, we're going to jump into some questions. So the first one is, what data does Mesa use to determine school needs to change to 2-day in-person or fully remote learning?
You know, there's a lot of data that we look at. Yeah, I'll jump in with that one because that's what I do each day. So obviously we start with the state metrics. We take a look and see what the zip code data says to us, and we see what's going on in the community. But we know that that doesn't tell the full story of our schools, because we have schools that have zip code data that looks very, very bad, but we have no cases on that campus and have had no cases on that campus. So it's important for us to use the state and local data to inform our decisions, but then to dig deeper and to look at how many cases, positive cases, how many students are home in an isolation because they've exhibited symptoms or because a family member has tested positive. So we call those Q codes. We have students who are out on Q codes, meaning that they have been put on quarantine because of various things. It could be that they exhibited symptoms at school. It could be that somebody in their house has tested positive, or it could be that they themselves have tested positive and therefore their siblings are on Q codes too. So when I talk about looking at school data, Q codes is one, positive cases is another, and then as we dig deeper into positive cases, it's important for us to take a look at those positive cases in context. Are they clumped in one classroom, one program, one team? Or are they scattered throughout the campus? Are they adults or are they students? Do we have a problem with a bunch of adults testing positive, or is it students throughout the campus? And then we take a look at student absences and adult absences also when we're taking a look at the data. So all of those things play a role. So I take a look and I say, okay, I see that we had a couple of cases on this specific campus today. I wonder what's going on. So the next step I take is to call the principal and say, tell me, are these clustered in a group, a team, a program, a classroom? Can we see a pattern to that data? And then we engage in the conversation about what's next. So that's the data that we use to make the determinations. The next steps that we take involve, okay, what should we do about it? If the answer is yes, I see a pattern, then we decide what to do. So do you want me to jump into that next, Dr. Phillips?
Well,
I'm guessing that's your next question.
Yes, and I also want to. So as we think about the trends in the school, we also look at, and I think I know Holly, you'll jump into this, but we look at what has already been done to mitigate. What is the culture of the school? How good are they at living into those mitigation strategies? Have we already tried up to the mitigation strategy and it's not working? So all of that goes into identifying case by case, school by school, what this looks like. So yes, please add on.
Yes. So we've had several situations across the district where the cases have clustered in a team or a classroom or a program. And so our first step is to say, okay, let's quarantine that team, that classroom, or that program to see if by doing that, we can stop or slow the spread on campus. Because maybe it's this group of students who've spent time together and we had a positive in the room and they're spreading it. Like, we used to see it all the time back in the day with the cold or a flu. Now it's COVID. So they spread it among each other and you can kind of watch it grow. So our first mitigation strategy, if we know that 6 feet and masks and all of the things that we say don't seem to be working and we still have positive cases, then we would quarantine a classroom. We've done it at several of our elementaries. We've done it at a preschool program. We've done it at a couple of high schools. That's our first step, because before we change learning models for an entire population, we try to contain, if we can see a pattern, to contain those positive cases and create an environment where they stay home for 14 days, stop or slow the spread, and then see what the impact is. In many cases, we've been very successful with that. We've had a couple of elementary school classrooms, a second grade, a preschool, where we've just sent that class home for 14 days and we were able to bring them back. Everybody's healthy, everybody's back at it and learning. And the teacher just taught remote for those 14 days and we were able to restart those classrooms and feel good about that as a mitigation strategy. And we did not have to close down the entire school.
That's a perfect example, because COVID doesn't behave the same, in every classroom and in every school. It comes to us in many ways. So there's a question coming in, or a concern, that the metrics are 2 weeks old. So Mrs. Williams, can you explain how you look at the coming data as well as that you're looking forward and backwards at the data?
The reason that the data is 2 weeks old is it takes that long for all the test results to come in. So, that's just the nature of the beast. If any of you have had a COVID test, you know it takes 5 to 7 days to get results right now because the demand is so high. So for those tests to not only be reviewed and then added to the state dashboard, it takes a little bit of time. So what I watch is 2 dashboards that the state puts out. So county is updated for us every 2 weeks, but the state has a daily dashboard that updates every morning on their website, and it tells me positive cases, and it shows the epi curve of those cases. And so I watch that as a predictor, Dr. Forlis, of where we're going. And then I also watch the lab results. So I can see at any moment, like early in the week, typically, the percent positive is very high because there's very few tests in the hopper. By the end of the week, that usually stretches out a little bit. So this morning when I checked the state data for daily test results, we were at 12% positive for the county. We know over the course of the week that will go down a little bit because there'll be more tests in the queue, but today that's where we're at. So I watch both the county data that shows us the 2-week lag, and that's the most accurate because then all the test results are in there, but then I watch the day-to-day to kind of see where we are. The other data that I watch, of course, is the internal data of our families reporting to us, so I can see exactly at what schools we have positive cases popping.
So that brings me to another question that is coming in. What about families that don't report their positive cases?
Frankly, I'm frustrated by that. Our mitigation strategy at the beginning of the year, we have a health attestation that the family signed at the beginning of the year saying that they would agree to these terms, that this would help us stay open. And one of the things they agreed to when they signed that was that they would report positive cases to us. And so it's frustrating to me to think about that there are perhaps families not being honest with us. I would say that I hope that's not the majority. We have an awful lot of people being very conscientious and very forthright with us and telling us about the positive cases, knowing that it makes a difference for other children. I would hate to think that people are purposely keeping it a secret so that doesn't impact their families, but not realizing the impact it could have on other families. The reason that we need to know positives is if I'm positive here in the office, Andy, I need to be able to say to you, hey, Andy, I'm positive, watch out for symptoms, so that you don't ignore a sneeze or a runny nose, that you pay attention to those symptoms so that you don't go around your mom or, an elderly aunt and get them sick inadvertently because I didn't tell you that COVID is in the area. So I just think it's a kindness that we show each other when we share the. And I know I know that it means that students will be remote. I know that, but that's what's going to keep us safe right now and keep our schools open. If people don't tell us that students are positive and they send their students anyway, we're creating a very unsafe situation for folks. So I hope that that's not the thing that's regular, but rather an irregularity.
So on the flip side, so we just talked about positive, and we also know that the county reports to us positive cases as well. So a family may not report, but the county will. So eventually we are going to learn about this, and it's pretty, and that's the level of frustration, is we know that we could just be better citizens by making sure that we communicate often and openly.
So we could also, to add to that, I want to add, we could also communicate better, right? We would be faster with it if folks would tell us up front and we don't have to wait for the lag of a day or two that the county's going to catch up. They are going to catch up. You're very right with that. The county does call us with positive cases, but we would communicate better if the families would do what they agreed to do when they signed the health attestation when we reopened.
And again, I really believe that this is a small number.
I do too.
We have such amazing families that are following all of the rules. So we talked about positive cases. Now here's another question coming through. Why don't we require a negative test to return to school?
CDC and Maricopa County have shared with us that's not best practice because people can test positive for COVID for a long time, even though they're not contagious anymore. So the contagious period is the 10 days. And if your symptoms have improved, meaning you don't have a fever without, no medicine after 10 days for 24 hours, and your symptoms have improved, you're not contagious anymore. So it's about the time of contagiousness. And so people can test positive for COVID and not be contagious anymore. So it's a little bit of a back and forth, but best practice by the CDC and Maricopa County tells us that we shouldn't be having folks take those tests.
So we've talked about taking a look at data and making decisions school by school, classroom by classroom. We do have 2 schools that we changed their learning model, Mesa High School as well as Sousa Elementary. So can you talk through the example of why our decision to move Mesa High from 5 days of modified in-person to 2 days? We'll talk about Mesa High first, and then we'll go on to Sousa.
Yes, and I think it's a good compare contrast on the reason why it's important for us to not just apply the same formula to each school. So at Mesa High, we were seeing an increase of student cases, and we had tracked it to one program, one sports team. And so we started with a mitigation strategy of quarantining a sports team, and we did that for 14 days. But we continued to see a steep increase in cases, even though the sports team had been quarantined. And so we believed that we had a bigger problem than just this. As I talked about earlier, if we thought we could contain it with one mitigation strategy, that's what we tried first. And then we saw what the results were. We saw that we weren't having the results that we hoped. And so we believed that with the student cases, fewer students on campus would help us at Mesa High. And so we moved them back to the AB model, the 2-day model, to reduce the number of students and to slow the spread. We are still seeing positive cases at Mesa High, so I won't tell you that it fixed it totally, but I think it slowed it down for us, because if we would still have the same number of students on campus each day, we might even have more. So we are monitoring that closely, watching it day to day, and seeing if our strategy is working to slow the cases. In contrast, I'll just jump into Sousa if that's okay.
Go to Sousa Elementary,
Okay.
absolutely.
So the difference there is we moved them to remote. And the reason that one's different is the cases at Sousa are adult cases. So we saw a dramatic upswing in cases last weekend, so a week ago, where we went from having 2 people positive to within a short few days, we had 11 positive cases, and they were adult cases. And the challenge so our first thing is, okay, can we contain it to one program? And the answer was quickly no. When you have a small elementary school with that many people positive, it's clear that it's not just one program. So we jumped to remote for them because fewer students on campus doesn't help us, because we were having an adult problem. We were having trouble staffing the school, and remote seemed like the safest way to go. So we've put them on remote learning until after Thanksgiving break. They'll be back on the Thursday. Hopefully we will have slowed the spread down there in Sousa, and we'll see fewer cases, and people will have a chance to get healthy again and be back at it in person on the 4th.
And I think, again, those 2 examples are really important to help to understand there is not a very simple formula to change a learning model, that it is truly school by school, case by case, to get to that very best outcome with the least amount of disruption to our kids. Here's a question. We've learned that there have been in some communities that there are either families or there are companies that are putting together parties or formals for our students. And they're inviting them. They come through on the kids' social media. They need to Venmo to purchase tickets. And then they find out the day of the event, they find out the location. So that already seems a little bit fishy. And it's probably, we don't believe it's safe either. So kids that are going to be going to those formals or those parties, what are we doing about it inside of Mesa Public Schools?
Well, what we're doing is trying to use forums like this to educate folks that these are not Mesa Public Schools events. These are not sanctioned by our school, and that we're saying out loud as many times as anybody will listen, this is not a safe practice. They put right on their flyer that the person who attends assumes all risk of COVID. And I would tell you, gatherings like that are high risk for COVID. And I would encourage families to think differently about that kind of activity for your children. I know at the beginning of this pandemic, people believe that students didn't get it. We're not seeing that to be true, especially our high school students. We have a number of students who've tested positive. And I would just tell you that if we're going to keep our schools open, which is our goal, as Dr. Forley said at the beginning, engaging in activities where there's large groups of students who don't typically get together for other things, perhaps mixing of campuses, mixing of grade levels, mixing of families, is very risky behavior in the middle of a pandemic. And we would encourage families to not do that. So our stance is, Dr. Forlis, is let folks know it has nothing to do with Mesa Public Schools, and Mesa Public Schools does not condone it, encourage it. In fact, we're shouting from the rooftops, please don't do that. Make a different choice. We understand these are difficult times, and their kids are missing out on some things that we all hold very dear to our hearts and memories that we have as high schoolers. But I would encourage you to look for other ways to make memories with your students and not ways that would create more of a risk during a pandemic.
Thank you. And we've also talked to the city of Mesa to alert them so that they can have a watchful eye, because that would be a violation of our county mask mandate. And so we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that as well. So we have reached out to city officials and are trying everything that we can from a school district perspective to deter this type of behavior and these type of activities. Here's a question. Somebody has received, they have 3 kids at a school and got a classroom three kids at a school and got a classroom letter, but I don't know which one. How might we fix that? How might that happen with the letters? And then I'd like to talk about communication directly to the school as well.
We've changed the letters a little bit to include the grade level, so hopefully that helps narrow it down for the family. And if you have multiple children and you have, let's say, twins in the same grade and different classrooms, then I would encourage you to reach out to the principal. We have principals are so worried about making sure that they keep the positive cases private, right? Because it's a concern about the privacy of the person who has COVID. We just are trying really hard, but we are loosening up, allowing them to at least just to share the classroom so that a parent can be better informed. So the letter has changed recently to include that information. So hopefully you'll see that change coming your way if you see letters in the next couple of days and weeks. And if you feel like you need further information, I encourage you to reach out to your principal, and they should be able to give you more specific without telling you who.
Thank you. And we've got a question about a preschooler. Does my preschooler really have to wear a mask now? And then the rationale behind that.
Yes, they do. The executive order was signed last week from Governor Ducey and Dr. Kara Christ from the Arizona Department of Health Services that preschoolers, so it's age 2 and above now, have to wear a mask in public and at school, excuse me. And so that means before we had it set at kindergarten and up, so we had to adjust for our preschoolers. I'll tell you, I think I see preschoolers out at stores. I see preschoolers out and about with their families. I think that they're capable of wearing them. We'll have to do some more reminders, and we'll have to do some more practicing so that they don't take a drink out of their water bottle with their mask on their face, and fun things that 3 and 4-year-olds do. But I believe that it'll keep us safer. We have had some cases because in the past, before the rule started on Thursday, where if someone in a preschool room got sick, we had to immediately quarantine the room because we couldn't say that our mitigation strategies of masks were in place. And that's one of the things the county asked us. So we think that perhaps we will have to quarantine fewer classes because the rule has changed if the students are wearing their masks, because that increased mitigation strategy helps with keeping classrooms open. So we're hoping it's a good thing. It's going to be a bit of a challenge, but our teachers are up for it. Many of the kids come wearing them in the mornings anyway, so I think we're ready.
Excellent. I think that's really important for everybody to understand that was an executive order and really the goal of keeping kids in school. So here's a question that has come through in different ways. So if all 3 metrics, cases per 100,000, percent positivity, and percent of COVID-like illnesses, if all 3 of those metrics go into the red, will Mesa Public Schools close? And the definition of close, just to clarify, is that we would move to remote learning.
Tag, you're it. No, I'm kidding.
No. Yeah, this is an us conversation for sure. This is how the day goes. Most of our days. I'll start off, and you can add some more details. We continue to work very closely with the county health department and to understand those metrics, and we are looking at them all of the time. You'll see right now, one of our metrics, the number of cases per 100,000 is in the red. That means that we need to be preparing to move to virtual learning. So preparing to move to virtual learning are the things that we're talking with you about right now. What does that look like school by school? How are we looking at the data in many ways? So if we have 3 red metrics, we would be in close conversation with our county health department, who would be giving us very strong guidance on what our next moves are. Now, if we are not seeing cases in our school or in a particular school or a group of schools, we would share that with the county health department as well, and we would have a conversation. So the 3 red is a strong indicator that we would be moving to remote learning. Do you want to add on to that, Holly?
I was going to share something that I saw on social media this weekend, where folks are thinking that our dashboard isn't accurate. So I just want to, if you don't mind, I want to jump into that conversation just briefly, because we do the dashboard for 14 days of active cases. And so I saw some families this weekend say, I know it's more because I got a letter today. They're right? Because we stop it on Wednesday nights for Thursday morning posting, but then the letter that you got on Friday will go on to the next week's dashboard. So I want to make sure that I know that you got a letter on Friday. That means the dashboard number is no longer right, but it will catch up the following week, because while I have a live count, and that's what I'm using to have conversations with principals, the dashboard for our community is updated once a week. So in addition to the county dashboard that's 2 weeks behind, ours is about, depending on what day of the week it is, 3 to 4 days behind, because of we update it once a week. So I wanted to share that little piece of data too.
Yes, and I also want to go back to the conversation around when we have a red metric, we begin to prepare for remote learning. And part of that preparation I would like to share with everybody who's watching is that when we start to see the number of cases increase at a school, Mrs. Williams reaches out to that school principal and that leadership team and has a conversation and says, this is the pattern, this is what we're seeing. And then she dives in with a lot of questions and gives them the tools to be able to start communicating to teachers and to families that we might be in a place where we're going to have to change our learning model. So we know that all of our research tells us that our families like to hear from their schools and directly from their school. So we're part of that preparation is bolstering up the knowledge and the skills of that leadership team so they can begin preparation and they can begin to communicate. So know that that is a part of that step as well. Here's a question about a high school student and remote learning. My high school student isn't getting any live instruction and that's just not working. Is that the norm?
I hope not. I hope that's not the norm. That might be the norm if you are an MDLP student, but a remote student attached to one of our high schools should be seeing some live instruction in some way. And so I would encourage you to reach out to your student's counselor and have a conversation about what's going on, so the counselor can get with the appropriate teacher and see if there's a challenge with the technology or what's going on. But I would not anticipate that your child would not have any interaction with their teacher as far as live instruction if they're a remote student. Our expectation is that they are having that weekly.
Excellent. And we've got 2 minutes left. And is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today as we think about what the metrics, the data, how we continue to stay vigilant to keep our schools open?
I just want people to hear, I want people to know that we're not just paying lip service, that when I say that we're spending time with the data, this is what the team of folks that I have working around me do each day. We pay attention to each case. I can speak to you about the cases that came in today. We track them. I know, when they had their test. I know what programs they're in. We look at, when we talk about knowing students by name, serving them by strength and need, we're doing that even during COVID. We're paying attention to who they are as children and how they're impacting the school that they go to. We have, 20 some schools right now who have no cases of COVID on their campus. And while the community around them has metrics that would say that they should have some on their campuses, we're very fortunate that they don't. And we believe that's through the hard work of our teachers and the mitigation strategies that they're following each day to keep our children safe. So I would say to you that what we are paying attention, the data is being used to inform our decisions, and it's not just the county data once a week. It's a daily conversation. I had some folks ask me, well, so on Thursdays you make all the decisions. No, we make decisions every day because it's what's in the moment, what students need that day to be safe. And we're having those conversations with principals each day. So I just wanted to share that. I think it's important that folks know that it's not a once a week kind of conversation around here, that it's a moment to moment.
Absolutely. And I would just like to close by reminding our staff and our families that November 30th, that is that Monday after Thanksgiving, is a very intentionally designed day. That day is designed as both a mitigation strategy as well as a much needed planning and recuperation day for our staffs. We know that there is talk of large family gatherings for Thanksgiving. And I sent out a community message on Friday, and I have received that some families did not like the tone of that message, and that I should not be talking to them about how they celebrate or gather over the Thanksgiving holiday. That is completely up to families, but we need to understand that there is risk involved. And so that Monday is a day that if there are any symptoms that start to creep up based on large gatherings, please keep your children home. If you're an employee, please stay home. Get tested, and when you're healthy, come back to school. That is an intentional remote learning day for that particular purpose. Many have asked, so are you going to close and go back to remote learning after Thanksgiving? Our answer is no. We want to stay open, and we need all of your help in order to be able to stay open. So Wednesday, there is no school for students. That following Monday, November 30th, is no school for students. Enjoy, take a breath, rejuvenate, and make sure that when we come back, that we are only coming back if we are healthy and ready to be in a classroom. We take this very seriously, and we want to do all that we can to keep our schools open safely. So thank you for joining us. I think that we have gotten through the majority of questions that we could stream through in this time. I thank you. I cannot thank you enough, Holly, for the work that you continue to do, the relationships that you've built, and the diligence of studying this data and bringing the best minds together to make decisions. So again, thank you very much. And thank you to our community for joining us on this special edition of Facebook Live. Have a wonderful evening.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.